Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And, the plan for tonight was to go live and talk about wide receivers and tight ends. And I was going to give you all an update on my AC unit, which broke. And I'm still extremely hot because it's 90 degrees. And so I was about 15 minutes from going on when I'm scrolling this here phone. And what do I come across? But more unfortunate offseason Minnesota Vikings news. I will read to you the entire report from the OC Register here regarding the DUI arrest of Jordan Addison. So off we go. This is exactly what all of you wanted right now, right? Which we'll get into in the implications as we go forward. But wanted to read the entire report to you before we go. So here is what is reported from the Los Angeles Daily News. The OC Register also reporting this, or it might be the same thing. I'm not sure. So here it is. From El Segundo in the Los Angeles area. Former USC wide receiver and current Minnesota Vikings star Jordan Addison was arrested on suspicion of drunk driving after being caught asleep at the wheel near LAX, authorities said Sunday. The California Highway Patrol was dispatched at about 11:10 p.m. Friday to a report of a disabled vehicle blocking lanes from the westbound 105 freeway to northbound Sepulveda Boulevard, according to the CHP statement. Officers responding to the area reported a white Rolls-Royce blocking the number 1 lane of the freeway, quote, with the driver asleep behind the wheel. Addison, 22, was arrested at approximately 11:36 p.m. after a DUI investigation was complete. He was released at 1:36 a.m. Saturday, the CHP added. And the rest of the story is mostly focused on just his career, his background, and oh, by the way, the fact that just last year, Jordan Addison was also arrested behind the wheel, although he was awake when he was going 140 miles an hour in an area where he easily could have killed someone. Now, if this had happened any other year, any other time, it would be very, very bad because we're talking about strike 2 for Jordan Addison, 2 times behind the wheel with the police involved getting arrested. But for this to happen just days after his own teammate was killed by a drunk driver is so mind-boggling, so frustrating, so unforgivable that any Minnesota Viking player, and no one should ever do this, by the way, should ever get behind the wheel after drinking and driving. But to be arrested, and let me just say that it's always innocent until proven guilty. Although this one's a tough one when it's a DUI, when someone is asleep behind the wheel. And that's what they're being charged with. Innocent until proven guilty. But if indeed he was driving drunk behind the wheel just days after Kyrie Jackson was killed by a drunk driver, so thoughtless, so clueless, it's unexplainable how dumb you could possibly be to do this after what happened with Kyrie Jackson. You have to be dumb to do this anyway. But after that, after such an unbelievably traumatic event to your entire franchise, to have this happen is shocking. It is truly shocking. And you know what I was thinking about as this happened, as I'm reading this report, is last year with Jordan Addison. After he was arrested for driving 140 miles an hour, which, by the way, how many accidents and deaths are we on now for football players speeding? What's the receiver from the Raiders who will never play again because he killed someone speeding? So already that was a terrible, terrible thing that Jordan Addison did behind the wheel. How many reps of training camp practice did he miss? 0. He was told to not do it again by the team and by his friends. Well, there's a reason why some head coaches are a little harder on their players about things that happen off the field than Kevin O'Connell was with Jordan Addison. And maybe this is why. And also, by the way, Wes Phillips was arrested last year for DUI and flew to Las Vegas and still was there to be the offensive coordinator after being arrested for DUI. Why would it be shocking that players wouldn't respect anything when it comes to their off-field activity if there's no consequences whatsoever. And I wondered about that, by the way. I wondered about that. If you never have consequences to any of the actions that happen off the field, then why would anyone respect that? And look, Jordan Addison, it was Henry Ruggs. Thank you. Jordan Addison may just have a problem with driving. No matter what you do, no matter what type of penalty, he might just do it anyway because he might be that clueless. But still, this is why people call for suspensions, for punishment, for consequences when these things happen, so they don't happen again. That's why. And here we are again. Jordan Addison behind the wheel with another arrest, the second of his career in his second year at 22 years old. I'm at a loss for words with this, but I'll tell you what, Kevin O'Connell, this time, maybe don't let it fly, okay? This time, don't let it fly. Training camp starts soon. First team reps shouldn't be happening right away. And I don't know what type of suspension is going to happen for the league. And maybe that's what they'll do again. Maybe they will say, whatever. But in this circumstance, after they just lost a player who will never walk on this earth again because of drunk driving, and your player goes out and does this, if Jordan Addison's out there taking first team reps, then I don't know what someone would have to do in order to face punishment from this regime. I guess we'll find out. I shouldn't assume that they're not going to yet, but this is why we talk about it from last year. With a player of Jordan Addison's ilk, somebody who's just coming to the league as a rookie, to send no message whatsoever about driving in a way where he could have killed people last year in this community, the way that he drove last year, and to have no consequences whatsoever. Well, we talked to him. Well, fantastic. I guess it didn't work. I guess you're going to have a stronger talk this time with Jordan Addison. And again, I will say, innocent until proven guilty, but when you read that report, player falls asleep at the wheel and is now facing DUI potential charges here, I think we've got a good picture. So I just look at this as an instance that they're going to have to learn from as an organization, that you have to have a standard for players. You have to have consequences to actions, because otherwise, what have you got? This is what's going to happen. It should be, I don't know, maybe they'll leave it to the league and just say, you deal with it. But this goes beyond that, because one, he clearly didn't listen last time. That's number one. Number two is also the timing of it, considering what happened with Kyrie Jackson. When you add those two things together, the team should be taking immediate action when it comes to this with Jordan Addison, and not just saying, hey, it's a league matter. And if they do, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Then I guess if they do, then anybody can do anything that they want on this team, and there is no authority whatsoever, if that's how it ends up going. So an infuriating thing to happen after what just happened with Kyrie Jackson. And think about everything that the organization is going through because a drunk driver got behind the wheel and ran Kyrie Jackson's vehicle off the road. Think about the pain and the suffering and everything that is happening with that. And you should always get an Uber. You should always take a ride. But we're talking about someone who is a first-round draft pick with millions of dollars that can drive a Rolls Royce. There is no excuse whatsoever for this behavior. And now it makes me feel like Jordan Addison is just a liability, just in general. And this was about to be a very exciting year for him. But now, and we've seen players like this in the past with the Minnesota Vikings, but now, how can you trust anything that's going to happen? How can you ever go into the bye week or into the offseason or whatever and just assume that Jordan Addison is going to be fine? Because if you are this thoughtless to do this and get arrested at this time, right after Kyrie Jackson died, how can you be trusted off the field, period? So that's it. I don't know what else to say about it. It is truly startling to see this come up, that he did not learn from last year about his actions behind the wheel. And, Here's what I also don't want to hear: some sort of Mike Gundy. We've all done it. And just while we're doing this, by the way, just while we're doing this, there is reporting. The reporting is coming out of Los Angeles. It's just come out right now, by the way. So if you're asking like where the reporting is, Daily News Los Angeles is where this is coming out. But by the way, I don't think we'll hear any more O'Connell jokes about this either, as he kind of made a crack last year about putting the foot to the gas pedal with Jordan Addison when Justin Jefferson was out. I don't think we'll hear any more jokes when it comes to this. And that's why it shouldn't ever be a joke when it comes to how someone is performing behind the wheel, whether it's impaired or whether it's driving too fast or whatever is going to happen here with Jordan Addison. And I don't want to hear any Mike Gundy. We've all done it. I don't want to hear any, it was only this much over the limit. Anything over the limit is completely and totally and wholly unacceptable. Always, but especially in this moment. Truly, truly senseless for Jordan Addison. And again, I don't know what the result of this is going to be. I certainly would implore them to have it be something when it comes to this, to send a message that is much harsher than we talk to him. That's the only thing we can really say. I don't know what a suspension will be. I don't know how the NFL will look at this. I think that the NFL in general has looked at DUIs pretty strongly in the past. They did suspend Wes Phillips for a couple of weeks over this offseason. Probably that one could have been stronger. Maybe during the season is when that suspension should have taken place and not in the offseason to just let them kind of get around that. And I know that the charges I think they were eventually dropped with Wes Phillips. But either way, you're talking about this subject, this embarrassment for the franchise again. And every single person that I've seen commenting on it has the same reaction, just right now, really right now. So there isn't, again, much more we can really say about it other than there needs to be a much stronger message to Jordan Addison. And I don't think that he can be trusted as we talk about even going forward. When you look at Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, I mean, this is a reason to talk about why the team can be successful. But one arrest, a stupid kid thing to happen last year, okay, I am willing to put that in the past. But if you're talking about twice is a pattern now. Twice in 2 off seasons in the NFL is a pattern. And we can't be sure what Jordan Addison is going to be now going forward. I think he'll be a fine wide receiver when he's on the field. We'll see what the suspension and what the punishment is. I mean, all the rest. Can you be sure what is going to happen here? So again, if you just joined, Jordan Addison was arrested on suspicion of drunk driving after falling asleep at the wheel around 11 o'clock on Friday night. And it's just a joke. Honestly, it's just a joke to have this happen right after Kyrie Jackson. So that's it. Yeah, I guess you're right, Skol City Blues. I guess we need to start looking at wide receivers in next year's draft. I don't know. Again, I think that he is a very, very talented wide receiver, and I really hope that there is a message this time that gets across to Jordan Addison that's maybe more strong than just, we told him not to do it again. Maybe he was fined by the team behind the scenes last year. I don't know. Whatever it was, it wasn't enough. And I don't know. Jordan Addison likes playing football. Maybe take him off the football field. Maybe don't give him first team reps right after he does it. That was what really got me last year, was he did something that was so seriously risky in driving as fast as he did last year. And then right on the field, first team reps, first day of training camp. I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now. And I guess we'll see what comes of this after this. But at an emotional time for the organization, I think we're going to see maybe a different handling from Kevin O'Connell than some of the stuff in the past. And maybe after these things have happened, we can understand a little better when it comes to the way that Mike Zimmer viewed things like this, where if you recall the Mike Hughes and J-Ron Curse thing, that he was very vigilant, sorry, when it came to things like this that were off the field. Not perfect, I'm sure, but harsher, I think, in the way that he viewed them than they have been over the last 2 years. So we'll go forward after this, and now this becomes another storyline. Hey, by the way, you guys excited for camp? I mean, are you kidding me? You excited for camp? This was going to be a great camp to be really pumped about. And now here's the storylines going into camp. One player is killed by a drunk driver. The other player is arrested for DUI. You can't make that up. You can't make that up. So as we go forward with Jordan Addison, he looked great in minicamp. I presume that he will look good again. But every weekend, every weekend off, every, mini camp, whatever, I guess we're going to wonder, is this what Jordan Addison is going to end up having happen? So very frustrating, very, very, very frustrating. And I can't imagine what that phone call went like, but not good for the Vikings organization. So I don't have much more to say about it. I'm sure we all feel exactly the same way, that the nature of this and the timing of this is, I'm at a loss for words. Xenocide says Addison needs to wake the bleep up. Yeah, that's right. That's certainly right. Wake up. You have a chance to become one of the best wide receivers in the NFL if you can drive yourself to the airport without getting arrested for DUI, or maybe have somebody else do it. Maybe put the cars away, the Rolls Royce and the Lamborghini or whatever, and have somebody else drive you. Awful, awful, awful that this would happen. So my plan for tonight was to talk about the wide receiver group. Well, let's add it to the storyline. I have been doing my preview articles and things like that to the storylines of training camp. One of them being, will there be punishment for Jordan Addison during training camp, or will this also slide in the way that it did last year? Will we see him not be allowed to participate at the beginning of camp? Or will he just be out there like usual and the team will shrug its shoulders and say that it's a legal matter, and then we all look at each other in disbelief? I'm not sure. I'm not sure right now what way that's going to be. But I will tell you how I will feel if there is no repercussions that are laid down by the team. I will feel like any player should think that they can do whatever they want anytime, whenever, and it won't have repercussions. That's what I'll think. Is it's great to be loved when you lead an organization, have all the players like you, but it's a fine line. And I think somebody mentioned early 2000s Vikings. It's a fine line between having everybody like you and having everyone also respect your authority. And this, to do it again after no punishment last year, what do we expect? What do we expect to happen? And, you say these things then and it gets sort of shrugged off, but it's like you see it happen over and over again. Well, that's where it comes from. Anyway, does anybody want to talk about wide receivers? Anybody want to talk about training camp? Maybe you're right. Future retrospect, turning point in KOC's culture, depending on how he handles this. It might be. I believe fully that Kevin O'Connell has built an incredible relationship with these players that's very special. But you also have to have them respect the authority, respect the organization. It's a multi-billion-dollar organization. And to have this happen after last year, and then after Kyrie Jackson, right, only days following it, it has to come with an iron fist. It can't be, this is someone who's 22 years old, who could have a very long and successful career if he can learn from what he's done here. But I don't know if anybody learns if they just get a pat on the back and it's okay, kid, it's an apology. I mean, I'm sure Wes Phillips being an adult, so it may be a little different. But when it's a 22-year-old kid, or last year 21-year-old, there needed to be stronger consequences for somebody who did that. Didn't miss a single game, didn't miss a single practice. You could drive 140 miles an hour and just get away with it. Even though Henry Ruggs killed someone, even though those Georgia players, didn't they die? So it's unacceptable. It is completely unacceptable. And it makes you wonder a little more about the future of Jordan Addison than you did yesterday. So let's get into some other stuff, and you could talk Vikings questions. But usually I think that I have, over the years, I have gotten to a point of being sort of the calming voice during the panic. So just for example, with crazy rumors of Justin Jefferson and things, and I try to come on and I try to say, okay, let's be rational, let's be calm, let's not be overly emotional about this, and wait it out and see what happens. This is something I can't do that with. This is too serious. And all of you who felt the death of Kyrie Jackson, because when you cheer for this team, you get to know these people, you care about these people. And when that happens to them, it happens to you. And covering the team, it happens to me. It happens to the person who works in accounting. Everybody feels it. Everybody last week was gut punched, devastated by Kyrie Jackson being hit by a drunk driver and run off the road and passing away before he ever got a chance to step on an NFL field. And then a week later, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'll probably just sort of keep ranting about it. But my point was that it's impossible for me to not get angry about this as even just a citizen. I drive to LAX when I'm out there. It's where I have family in Los Angeles. All those other people, all those other Kyrie Jacksons in cars that you could kill. All right. So let's talk about wide receivers. Anybody want to? If you're just joining, I can real quick read the report again, just real quick, because I read it at the beginning, but a lot bigger audience now, about Jordan Addison. And then we can start to preview wide receivers and go through the battle for wide receiver 3 and all those things. But this team not allowing us this week to, I guess, heal from the what happened with Kyrie Jackson. So from the authorities in the Los Angeles area, California Highway Patrol, Jordan Addison arrested under suspicion of driving under the influence after being caught asleep at the wheel. Around Friday night, 11 o'clock, he was blocking lanes from the westbound 105 freeway to northbound Sepulveda Boulevard. Officers responding to the area reported a white Rolls Royce blocking the number 1 lane of the freeway with the driver asleep behind the wheel, according to the arrest report. We will learn more when we learn more, and we'll see what happens. But I don't expect there will be a trade or release or something like that. This is a valuable player to the organization, and the way that it works in the NFL is if you are good at football, the consequences are different. Jordan Addison is good at football, and they spent a first-round draft pick on him, and they're not going to get rid of him, trade him, release him. At the same time, handling it like they did last year cannot be acceptable. They cannot just say, we'll talk to him. These are very expensive, very fast cars that he is acting recklessly with. And that is a one-way ticket to something much worse than falling asleep. That's a one-way ticket to killing someone or himself. Henry Ruggs killed someone else. And instead of playing in the NFL, Henry Ruggs is in jail. And instead of playing in the NFL because of a drunk driver, Jordan Addison's teammate is gone. And forever. And to not have that on your mind the week after, what the hell is wrong with you? All right. Anybody want to talk about expectations for Brandon Powell? It's hard. It's hard. This is a hard week because last week I struggled to muster the energy to write about the offensive line. And somebody in the comments from the show the other night was not happy that I didn't talk very much about Kene Nwangwu and his role in the backfield, which of course will be nothing. And I just thought, who the hell cares? Kyrie Jackson's dead because of a drunk driver. I really don't care about the running backs at the moment. I truly don't. But it's the job and it's the season coming up. And so we go because that's how it works. And as I was just sort of getting to a point where I felt a little more like, okay, we're going to have to go forward here. So let's talk about it. Let's get into this. Let's still try to do the best we can, breaking these positions down and everything else. And then this happens. Maybe it's because my AC is broken, but I feel extremely heated over something like this because this has to do with all of us. This is everybody in society. This isn't just a Viking player. It represents everybody. But I did want to talk about the wide receivers. So I'm going to take a sip of Diet Dr. Pepper. I'm going to take a deep breath and then can answer your questions. We can have a conversation about the receivers. I spent a lot of the day working on all the receivers and tight ends, only to have 15 minutes before we go live, news that punches you in the face. Vikings, everybody. All right. Let's start off with Sean's question here. Hunter Renfrow, Randall Cobb, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones. Who can we afford? Do you want any of those players? This isn't a situation where I'm saying cut Jordan Addison. That's not realistic to do because he's 22 years old. He's a first-round draft pick. He caught 70 passes last year, and the expectations are still extremely high. My point is there needs to be much stronger of a message, not cut him and sign Hunter Renfrow. Now, if you're asking about the receiver depth and not relating this to Jordan Addison, then good. We could start to move on and have more of a discussion about the wide receiver position, and I would like that. And if you're just joining and you missed the conversation and ranting and so forth, just rewind and go back to the beginning of the video because I addressed as much as I can really address at this point, and we will learn more when we get an opportunity to learn more. We will see when the Vikings, if the Vikings release a statement. You really have to be thrilled, I'm sure, if you work for the Vikings and you keep getting these phone calls that you have to release statements on something like this because Jordan Addison can't drive a vehicle maturely. I look at what Hunter Renfrow did last year and the fact that nobody has signed him as a pretty good indication of where everyone thinks he is with his career. He is only a couple years separated from a great season, but fell out of favor with the Raiders, and he's not the fastest guy. He's been banged up at times, and he's pretty one-dimensional as a slot receiver. It's difficult for me to find where this is better than rolling the ball out there for a bunch of young players and saying, fight for it. That they have, and we'll go through them, a lot of players who will have an opportunity to rise to the challenge and win this battle for a wide receiver 3 position. But Julio Jones, Cobb, Michael Thomas, these are one-year solutions of players who have not been good in quite some time. Now on Madden, it's cool to pick up those players and throw them 100 passes or something. It's just hard for me to justify in the situation the Vikings are in, rather than giving young players opportunity and letting them jockey for position. That just seems more sensible to me than it would be to go after someone who's on the older side that hasn't had a good season recently and then say, hey, fit right in, right? I mean, you already need, when it comes to being a slot receiver, you already need Brandon Powell to get some slot reps, but Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson to get into the slot as well. How are you going to have Hunter Renfrow take almost all of his snaps there? That doesn't really fit. Michael Thomas will tweet if he doesn't like the way the quarterback is playing. He's been banged up a ton. Randall Cobb is only still in the league because he's friends with Aaron Rodgers, though once a good wide receiver, but that's true. Julio Jones was playing last year. There wasn't much there left. And there aren't really any good options. Even when you go through the free agent options at almost any position, once we get to this point, then you've gone too far anyway. And just to clarify, I'm not saying at all that we're talking about cutting Jordan Addison. That's going to have to be a separate issue that they deal with, but more of just the depth of the wide receiver position is already pretty weak. And even when we're talking about Jordan Addison and a potential suspension, now when you go to the Vikings depth at this position, it becomes potentially even more important for somebody to step up. And there are lots and lots of options for guys who could step up. So my question is Brandon Powell the locked in wide receiver 3, or is there some sort of competition that's actually happening then at this position? Because last season, Brandon Powell proved that he could do it. He proved that he could rise to the challenge if they needed him. He caught the game-winning touchdown against Atlanta. He was really getting on the same page with Kirk Cousins before Cousins got hurt. Remember, Powell had some excellent catches against the San Francisco 49ers, and he could play enough of outside wide receiver to line up there and understand how to do it, more effective in the slot. But he actually has a bit of a track record of playing receiver where when we go to everybody else, depth-wise, and I'm going to go through them, there isn't a whole lot there for players that are proven in any way. Jalen Nailor, we keep talking about Jalen Nailor, and if you compare the amount of press that Jalen Nailor has gotten and praise from the coaching staff versus the actual receptions, it's way more praise and not enough receptions. Last year he was hurt, and there's not a whole lot he could do about that. He came back and then got injured again. It was a bad break. He got popped and got a concussion in that game. So there wasn't much that Jalen Nailor was supposed to do. Then he missed a little bit of time during mini camp. I guess he had the flu, and Kevin O'Connell said the challenge is to get on the field. Again, it's hard to blame a player when they get injured, but we just haven't seen a whole lot of someone that they believe has a lot of potential. This is an enormous camp for him. If he can stay healthy throughout the entire camp, if he can make plays, if he can give them some confidence that he's going to become the player that he is projected to become, then that would be a huge boost for this entire group of wide receivers that right now seems pretty weak and eventually could look very strong if Jalen Nailor ends up being a quality wide receiver. He's kind of a swing guy for this position. Is if he steps up to the challenge and looks pretty good by the end of training camp, like they can get him in there and they can play him as a role player, as a deep threat, which he showed a little bit of a flash of in 2022. You feel different about the versatility of this group. And if someone were to get hurt, that he could step into a bigger role, slide everybody up the depth chart. But if we get to the end of training camp and Jalen Nailor has not had a lot of success or has gotten injured again, then we're going to be talking much more of who is the next person up. If somebody goes down, if somebody is suspended, like Jordan Addison, for example, we might not have an answer. So there's a lot of swing that is based on Jalen Nailor. Now, you guys are asking about other wide receivers that are free agents, and the Vikings did sign somebody with at least some time as a fairly significant player in the NFL for an offense one time in Trent Sherfield. In 2022, he had 30 catches for 417 yards, which is more than pretty much anybody else in this group of players that are fighting for position. But that's really it, because last year he only had 11 catches for Buffalo on a team that did not have great wide receivers. Sherfield is another player that has to step up if he's going to not only make this team, but also stay in the league. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. He has bounced around to a bunch of different teams, and he last year didn't get a lot of attention from the Bills. They wanted, I'm sure, wide receivers to step up. He wasn't on the field very often, and guys who hover around the fringe, sometimes that just runs out. Like, you've got potential that just runs out. And this might be his last year to prove that. This type of signing for the Vikings in the past has not been very successful. Jordan Taylor, Tavares King, Taji Sharp actually had a lot more in his past, and so did Kendall Wright. They're looking for somebody who could potentially be some kind of steal for them in Trent Sherfield. But, I'm not so sure if that's going to be the case. I didn't see much in terms of minicamp to think that. That's only minicamp. He has to learn the entire offense. He's got to get on the same page with the quarterback, but he's in the mix right now for this battle. And I'm sorry, I'll just probably keep repeating myself on the Jordan Addison arrest that I spent probably the first 25 minutes ranting about it. So if you're watching live and you want to rewind and take a look, my original plan was to preview the wide receiver position and not talk about a DUI. So I prepared a bunch of stuff on these players and everything else to talk about. So I wanted to get to that as well. Although it is very hot without my AC working still, but I am blessed to still have power. A lot of people lost power. I'm sorry if that happened to you. Oh, I didn't realize my book fell over behind me. It'll be okay. Let me get to the other wide receivers and we could talk a little bit about the tight ends. The on the bubble wide receivers. One of them is Tristan Jackson, who has had 2 very good off seasons the last 2 years, especially last year. He got hurt in the middle of training camp and then bounced back and was very good and eventually got into a couple games for the Vikings. He ends up with just 2 catches. He's a guy that during training camp and during mini camp, since he arrived here, actually before Kevin O'Connell, he has always stood out. He's always made a lot of catches, a lot of highlight reel training camp catches, but the opportunity has never quite shown up. And I don't think Tristan Jackson has that one skill that really blows you away. He doesn't have blazing speed. He doesn't have huge wingspan to jump up over people and make contested catches, but he does track the ball pretty well. And if he continues on the path of impressing year after year in the offseason, he could be that back end of the roster guy. Certainly not alone, though, in his position. There's another guy named Jackson, Lucky Jackson. I'm just going to go through each player and kind of lay this out a little bit. Lucky Jackson is an XFL guy who got in a couple games last year, played a little bit on special teams for the Vikings, didn't catch any passes. He had, I thought, a pretty good mini camp with a lot of opportunities to catch footballs. He was very good in the XFL, and that's all we really know about him after he was with the team last year. And the fact that they brought him back says that they think there's some potential there because they could have gone out and gotten anybody else. So they must like Lucky Jackson, at least to some extent. He's back here. Thayer Thomas, a guy who stood out to us last year during training camp, and Jonathan just asking about Thayer Thomas. Good route runner, very good hands, pretty smooth player, not the fastest guy, not the biggest, kind of an average type of player from a physical skills perspective, below average when it comes to speed for wide receiver. However, he does have the smooth route running and hands that gives him a chance. Now, would they look for somebody who's got a little more upside? I don't know. I mean, you might look for reliability, but a lot of these guys, to put it in Madden type terms, a lot of these guys are 75 rated type players on Madden. They're not 99s like Justin Jefferson's or 88s or whatever Jordan Addison is, where it's a player that stands way out from the rest and is in the top percentile. When you get to 4 or 5 different guys who are on the fringe of the roster, it's very tough to separate both of those players. So someone like Lucky Jackson versus Thayer Thomas, Lucky Jackson's a little bit bigger. Thayer Thomas might be a little bit smoother with his routes. Pick whichever performs better. And this is why the back end of this receiver group is pretty questionable, because it's hard to find too much of that, too much of a wow factor, even with a physical ability when it comes to some of these players. But Thayer Thomas has the natural things that you need the most to be a good wide receiver or a player who gets on the field in the NFL. And that is the route running and the hands. It has to start there. When you're talking about going up against NFL defenses and corners, if you don't have separation ability, you don't have contested catch ability that's above average, it's tough to be a player long-term with that. The next player on my list is Malik Knowles, who does actually have some exceptional physical capability, a 4'4" guy who was really, really good at kick returning and big plays when he was in college. But he was in college 2 years ago. He was hurt last year. So they called it kind of a red shirt type of year where they're bringing him back. They're hoping that he gets an opportunity to show what he could do, maybe kick returning a little bit with Kene Nwangwu. Teams might use 2 kick returners this time, but the big playability that he had in college, the explosiveness, the raw speed, it's there with Malik Knowles. So kind of the opposite type of player, did not have the hugest numbers in college, 48 catches for 725 yards receiving, just sort of okay numbers for a college player, but they're betting that maybe he's developed a little bit and has that raw speed and playmaking ability, natural playmaking ability with the ball to give them something on the back end as a receiver. That's where he's fighting with some other players that don't have the physical skill. He might be able to stand out because he can do the kick returning. That's not something that everyone can do. And then also he's quicker, he's faster. Didn't really get a feel for him during minicamp, to tell you the truth, because the next guy on my list I noticed a lot more, which is Jeshaun Jones. Jones is from Maryland. He had 2 very good seasons at Maryland after battling through injuries for a couple years, 24 years old. So he's spent forever at college, but now here, another guy with a chance who's a rookie, another guy that didn't have massive numbers, but they were pretty good. 790 yards receiving, 56 catches. Jeshaun Jones, I thought, was the best of the group that I didn't know anything about during minicamp. Made some contested catches. Not a huge guy, maybe 6'1", maybe 200 pounds on the lighter side, but made some plays out there, might have a chance. That's kind of the best I could do about Jeshaun Jones. Minicamp, they should stand out. They should catch the ball because there's no real physical play. And then the last guy on the list for the wide receiver group is Ty James, who was 2 years in a row really, really excellent at Mercer. Was one of the highest graded PFF wide receivers in FCS for the last 2 years, and he's going to fight for a spot as well. So that's the receiver group that is going to be fighting for spots. And when you go through those, you could see just about anybody, or, you guys could be right that they could add somebody else, or maybe what just happened with Jordan Addison might inspire them to go look for somebody else on the free agent market. Now, when you're talking about Michael Thomas, you're maybe asking for trouble with Michael Thomas because there's injuries and there seems to be some personality issues. And there was a off the field thing with a brick involved. I forget exactly how that went. That's not a pool that I want to dip myself into, but a Randall Cobb, if he wants to play, or a Julio Jones, I guess, another sort of injury riddle type of player, or maybe just somebody who's kind of bouncing around. I can't get on board with the Hunter Renfrow idea. People seem to really like it, but it's such a one-dimensional player who fell off so hard and then no one had any interest. That would scare me off. If nobody in the league has any interest, think about how much they're paying for wide receivers these days and how desperate everybody is for a wide receiver. And the whole league says, I don't think so. He's washed. He can't play anymore. And he's not a multifaceted player that you could put in different roles. He's really one-dimensional. Even Brandon Powell, you could do more with than Hunter Renfrow because he has explosiveness and quickness. But Renfrow is just a short area type of wide receiver. Maybe if they played a little bit different of an offense, more of a quick pass offense, but this is an offense that likes to go down the field. So there's your receivers and a bunch of players who have some reason to be intrigued. I'm much more interested in Thayer Thomas, Malik Knowles, Jeshaun Jones, Ty James, than maybe Tristan Jackson and Lucky Jackson, who we've seen enough of a sample size of. So kind of, all right, usher in this new group of UDFAs and things like that you're looking at that might have some higher potential than those players, but they also could be relied upon if they had to get in the game because they've been with the Vikings over multiple years. Right now, not a group that you have a ton of confidence in if Jalen Naylor doesn't work out. If he works out, then we won't have to talk about any of the other wide receivers, and they'll have 4 good wide receivers all ready to go. Let me get into the tight ends because I wanted to talk about that as well and move myself even farther from talking about a DUI, because then I'm just going to get more upset again. And just one more time for everybody, if you're just tuning in earlier, spent the first half hour of the show talking about nothing but Jordan Addison's DUI arrest. So you can go back and watch that. I'm out of energy to talk about it anymore with what's happened over the last 2 weeks here with this team. But I said what I said. So at the tight end position, though, and guys, if you got questions, feel free. Maybe some of you can cheer me up a little bit. This has not been a happy couple of weeks talking about the Vikings. But if you have questions, doesn't have to be wide receiver group, anything that's on your mind, feel free, drop it in the chat. Happy to answer your questions. Carry on, maybe lighten this up a little bit from where it's been. But I'll go through the tight ends since we're there. With TJ Hockenson, I don't have any expectation that we'll see TJ Hockenson at any point during training camp, because that type of injury with an ACL tear, it's going to take quite a while to recover. That's not something you can overcome quickly. I don't think there's a timeline to that. That's pretty standard. And it is what it is. It takes X number of months for it to heal. And that probably is going to put him into the middle of the season, maybe, or early middle part of the season before he can actually play. But on a daily basis, it will be worth watching what Hawkinson's situation is, because if he somehow becomes ahead of schedule, then that battle becomes a lot more difficult with guys trying to fight for that last spot and so forth. If there's any chance that Hockenson could get on the field during training camp and start the season, I don't think so, which then opens this up to being a position that has a real battle going on. And that starts with Johnny Munt, Josh Oliver, Robert Tonyan. All three of these guys have been around during their careers. Oliver was with Baltimore. Robert Tonyan was with the Packers and with the Bears. And then Johnny Munt has been with the Vikings the last 2 seasons, was with the Rams before that. So all proven veteran players, but fit and how well you can emulate TJ Hockenson has to be the thing that drives the decision at the tight end position. Robert Tonyan looked the most capable of doing that. Munt and Oliver made their careers as blockers, and Munt has been pretty good at catching the ball for the Vikings, better than he was for Los Angeles. He only caught a handful of passes ever for Los Angeles, and then last year he's over 20 receptions and had a couple of good games as he was filling in for Hockenson. But Robert Tonyan has multiple 50-catch seasons. One year he caught 11 touchdowns, which was wild, with the Green Bay Packers. And he's got a little more speed down the field than the other guys, which might give him a chance to win this job and be a late offseason pickup that works out great for the Vikings. As of right now, I would be saying that Robert Tonyan might start week 1. That could be getting too far ahead of myself, though. We've got to see it in training camp. Munt knows this offense inside and out. So does Josh Oliver. Oliver last year was great in camp. And when he caught the ball, outside of that one time he fumbled, when he caught the ball last year, he was good. He was a force at times last year catching the ball because he's so massive and has such huge hands that he ended up with more receptions than I thought he was going to. Both of those guys are pretty talented as far as actual hands catching the ball. They don't have stone hands. So Tonyan, if he's going to make the team, will have to be pretty good. And then there's 2 other guys that are also fighting for position, and that would be Nick Muse and Trey Knox. Nick Muse has been developing for 2 years, got into 2 games last year. One, he played just special teams, and then played against the Lions, had 1 catch, a very nice catch for 22 yards. And that's all we've seen of Nick Muse in his career. But they have spent a lot of time developing him. He had a really good training camp last year and made the team, was inactive for most of the year, but made the team when they kept 4 tight ends. That doesn't usually happen all that often. And then Trey Knox is a guy that when undrafted, they picked him up. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I need to mention one more. Yep. Hold on. All right. Okay, that's right. N'Keal Harry is still listed on the roster as a wide receiver. So you're right. Talk about him in just a second. But Trey Knox is a converted wide receiver, like N'Keal Harry, but he did it in college. And then over his last 2 years at South Carolina, mostly caught short passes, was not a big time player for them. But every report that I read about Trey Knox looked at him as a converted receiver who had actually pretty decent run blocking chops for a former wide receiver, solid route running, maybe looking for a little more after the catch, but his production was okay for a college tight end for a team that wasn't that good at South Carolina. He's much more of a probably ends up on the practice squad guy because there's so much depth here with veteran players at the tight end position. And then N'Keal Harry will be fighting for a spot, fighting for his NFL life. And this also might help N'Keal Harry find a job somewhere else if he shows that he can play tight end with the Vikings, because it's unlikely that he's going to make the team. You can put veterans on the practice squad. Maybe that's what they'll do with N'Keal Harry at some point. He is enormous and a guy that probably should have been a tight end the whole time. I have to think that it was brought up to him through his college career. Buddy, you ever think about maybe blocking somebody and play tight end? Because he's got the size for that. He's too big to be a wide receiver and trying to beat cornerbacks with his moves, but he can certainly box people out and probably just box people in general. He's one of the most ripped, large human beings on the team relative to his position. And that still applies now that he's a tight end. He's that big. He looks like an edge rusher. He, as a tight end, could block pretty well. He was a great blocker as a wide receiver, and maybe there's a chance that he could find his way into the mix, but I'm pretty skeptical that he could beat out Tunyon, Munt, or Oliver for one of those positions. They could keep 4 again if they really like how he looks. It's not easy to change positions in the NFL no matter what you do. This might be a multi-year project, or it might just be, hey man, we like you. This is your best chance to stay in the NFL. Why don't you work at tight end for us? See if somebody else likes what they see who needs a tight end, because the Vikings really don't. But a storyline to watch nonetheless, because N'Keal Harry was actually good for them in training camp last year, came right in, made some good catches for him. And I think they liked him and liked what they saw and wanted to find a way to keep him around because he wasn't really competing for a wide receiver spot. Jonathan, I did talk just a little bit about Ty James. And the only thing I really know about Ty James from Mercer is just the fact that he had incredible PFF grades, was one of the highest graded players in both years that he played at Mercer. I didn't take a lot of notice of him during minicamp. That's his first minicamp. He's a UDFA. I don't think that he has a chance to actually make the roster, but might be someone for the future. And that's the other battle that's going on, is all these players at the wide receiver and tight end positions are fighting for those practice squad spots that have routinely developed into something more for this team. And this has got a lot of battles going on at this wide receiver position, and going into training camp, it will be one of the most interesting. And I guess we'll have to wait a little while to actually get into talking about this on a daily basis, because at the beginning of camp, we're going to have to talk about players getting DUIs like Jordan Addison, and the black cloud that is over the organization at the start. It already was going to be a very difficult and painful start to the summer for the Vikings because of what happened with Kyrie Jackson. And now this adds, on top of already everyone mourning about it, now anger to go along with it as well from the organization at something that was so thoughtless. So it will be more challenging to muster the same type of energy because there is so much intrigue. And that's what is disappointing about Jordan Addison doing this in part, is the organization, I think, was going into this training camp feeling pretty interested in what's going to happen and pretty excited about a new direction. And there's nothing that they could do about the tragedy with Kyrie Jackson and what everyone's going to have to work through with that. But as far as just an overall feeling of the roster, the new players, the new quarterback, a lot of excitement there. And then this happens. And now, okay, what's next, right? What's next? And okay, Jordan Addison's going to be out there, but can you believe in him to be out there all the time? Or is there going to be more off the field problems that go on with him? Treylon Burks would be interesting for a 7th. So Treylon Burks, I'm interested because he wasn't bad 2 years ago. Kind of intrigued at players that teams are ready to give up on. Are they ready to give up on him? Last year, it seemed like he fell out of favor, but if I'm the new coaching staff and leadership, I don't know if I trade him. Has there been rumors? You'll have to tell me if you've seen any rumors out of Tennessee that they would actually trade Treylon Burks. The Vikings saw a little bit of him last year during those joint practices, but I think he got hurt during the joint practices, so he didn't participate as much. I'm not sure if they have an opinion on him, but he is somebody that if you compare to Brandon Powell and compare to, Jalen Naylor, at least has a little more in his background and more talent for sure with his draft pick. It just would be surprising if they could bail that fast and say, all right, ask the Patriots about KJ Osborne. I think the Patriots are going to like KJ Osborne. I saw just some of their reporting because I follow my old friend Chad Graff, who used to cover the Vikings. It seems like KJ Osborne has fit in quite nicely there. And we know that mini camp, training camp, KJ always steps up. He even did last year and had a disappointing year ultimately, but he's a better wide receiver than a lot of the guys they have in New England. I don't think that they would be able to get him back. I don't look at this situation right now, even with Jordan Addison and his DUI, as a spot where the Vikings have to go out and get someone else. That they have to give up draft capital or they have to sign a free agent who is still remaining out there. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as they need to make the message very undeniably clear to Jordan Addison that this can never happen again. Just like what happened last year when they didn't make that message clear and they just said, well, we talked to him about it and then there was no other ramifications. They need to do that. I don't believe that the answer here is to cut Jordan Addison or to go out and sign someone else to replace him. But it does put more of an emphasis on the backups here because he could be suspended to start the season or in the middle of the season or whatever the NFL gets around to it. I will never really understand how the NFL does its punishments. When do they have those meetings? Who decides? Is it when somebody gets around to it? Like if you've got an email that you don't want to answer and you just let it drop down the email inbox and 3 weeks later you go back to it and respond. That's how the NFL seems when it comes to his punishment. But I've also gotten the sense from the league that they do take DUI pretty seriously when it comes to handing down punishments. And I would expect that Jordan Addison, particularly after last year, is going to get a punishment from the league. And I'm surprised that he didn't last year. Really surprised that he didn't last year. And, someone like Hunter Renfrow or Randall Cobb, I'm just not sure how much that is an improvement over the idea of having everybody compete for wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4. Randall Cobb has not been good for quite some time, even when playing with Aaron Rodgers. He was Aaron Rodgers' friend, so that helped him. But was he above average at all? Above what you would expect from Brandon Powell? If I told you that Brandon Powell got 35 catches and averaged 11 yards a catch on 65 targets or something, or 55 targets, you'd go, oh, okay, well, that seems fine. I mean, do we really think that Randall Cobb is going to have more than that? I don't know. Anthony says, for the first 9 games look crucial for us, and now we'll probably only have Jefferson for the first 4 weeks, down the other top receivers. Well, I don't know what they're going to do. When it comes to the NFL and when that penalty will come out. And that's hard to say. It does, in my mind, enhance the battles a little bit, though. We've seen Brandon Powell's not really a guy that you could step into the role of somebody like Jordan Addison. You can't just go ask him to do everything like Addison is capable of doing. But when will it be? Will it be at the beginning? Will it be at the middle? Will it be at the end of the season? Or will it be next year? You really have no idea when the NFL is going to hand down these punishments. And I haven't found over the years any type of consistency. They waited until the offseason to suspend Wes Phillips. That was strange. Seemed like they should have done it for the regular season when they handed it down. And when it comes to someone like Randall Cobb, Hunter Renfrow, you're going to have to show me recent performance that was decent to sell me on this, because Hunter Renfrow, I looked this up, out of all the players with at least, I don't know what it was, 50 targets, he was last in PFF grade. I mean, he did not play well at all. And if you're going to play him, he has to play one specific role with one specific thing that he does well that worked really well for Derek Carr to throw him super short passes. Is that what they're going to want to do with Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell's offense to make him an effective player? I'd rather have Brandon Powell. I'd rather roll the dice with Lucky Jackson and Jalen Naylor and Jashaun Jones and just see if something happens there. And, it's brought up that Renfrow isn't much of a blocker, which does matter in Kevin O'Connell's offense, how well the wide receivers can block. So I don't really see much reason to go out and get anyone else, but this may matter, this training camp battle, more if Jordan Addison gets a 2-game suspension, if he gets a 4-game suspension. The details may matter here as we end up getting more information about, I'm sure a BAC is going to come out or other things from this arrest, but one way or the other, being arrested is just so unacceptable after especially Kyrie Jackson passed away due to a drunk driving accident just the other day. 3 games, Lee says 3 games is the standard punishment. Makes sense to me. But will that be, my question is, will that be at the beginning, the middle, the end of the season? I don't know when it's going to come down. They might act a little quicker on this one because it is a second offense. It is a very notable player. And it might be resolved quickly by the police here. And this seems to be a pretty standard type of thing. Todd brings up Michael Floyd. Oh, there's been a lot of these incidences over the years. To have it happen right now, just awful. Jonathan asks, what about cornerback for signing one? There's only one guy that I would consider for cornerback, and I will get to eventually for the live shows preview of the cornerback position. That's not one that I was ready to really jump into yet. I've kind of been avoiding that one, but I will get there at some point. Stephon Gilmore is the only guy I would go for. That's not a long-term option, though. That's a very, very short-term option. Akilla Witherspoon, maybe you can give me an update on Witherspoon. Is there an injury there? Is there a reason? Because he played okay, but I don't know. I know why Xavier Howard isn't being looked at because of his legal issue, or at least he shouldn't be looked at because of his legal issue that is pretty concerning there, pretty messed up. I don't know if you want to bring that into the organization, but as far as Stephon Gilmore, played extremely good last year for the Dallas Cowboys. He graded over a 70 for them, gave up something like an 83 passer rating into his coverage. Some of it has to do with how the player plays. What is his strategy? Or what is your strategy versus what is his skill set? Is he better in zone? Is he better in man? Can you play him press coverage? Do you have to play him off coverage? With someone like Stephon Gilmore, it's pretty hard to say that you could just press him on wide receivers at this point in his career. We also did see not too long ago, Terrence Newman eke out a couple years at the end of his career with Mike Zimmer when he was 38 years old, something like that, when he was still playing with the Vikings, if not even older than that, 38, 39, when he was with the Vikings. And maybe we'll see Stephon Gilmore be the outlier there. If they're interested, I'm interested in Stephon Gilmore. And with Witherspoon, I don't really understand why he doesn't have a job. It's kind of like the Renfrow thing where if someone doesn't have a job by now, there has to be a reason, right? When they signed Bashaud Breeland around this time a few years ago, we went, oh, okay, that seems like a good idea. And it wasn't a good idea. Corey Davis. Okay. Yeah, I'm not, when was the last time Corey Davis played? I don't know. He's always had the injuries. I don't think he ever really lived up to the talent that he had. Maybe worth a shot. I would be more willing to take a shot on someone like Corey Davis that there are no real expectations for. 2022 was the last time he played. I didn't think he played last year. That there's no expectations for. I'd rather have that than someone like Julio Jones, or Michael Thomas, or even Hunter Renfrow, where you feel like you have to find a way after you sign them to get them into the mix. With Davis, it would be, hey, there's a long shot here. Let's see if he can do anything. It's a different vibe. But you're right, Jonathan, that if Addison is suspended, the wide receiving core has a lot less to work with when we're talking about the depth of this unit. And that's why suddenly there's even more of an emphasis on these players who are fighting for position. And maybe they will do what you guys are calling for, is go out and get somebody else, because it's not just Jordan Addison could be suspended. It's also Jordan Addison could do it again. I mean, we're already talking about 2 times with this sort of thing, this sort of issue with, being behind the wheel, the decision-making is pretty darn questionable for him off the field. What's next? You hope that there isn't anything next, but what's next? I don't know. So I think you have to consider that as well, probably. A couple of you have brought up with, and I'm not sure I really understand it, with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. I mean, I guess, is this because of Jordan Addison, drafting Jordan Addison? I don't really know. I mean, I think this one, well, it's only on Jordan Addison, him being arrested for DUI, only on him. However, I would connect this more to the head coach, as I did earlier in the show, not him being drafted by the general manager. He's drafted on having a lot of talent and skill, and he didn't have a background of any issues while he was in college with things like this. But sometimes money changes things. A Rolls Royce is what he was arrested in. And I think it was something very expensive last year that was going 140 miles an hour. I can tell you what, the old Honda Civic that I got over here doesn't get up to 140. So it was something very expensive. That decision-making is on him, and it's on him to take his career seriously. And that includes how you act off the field. But also, if you don't have any sort of punishment for a player of that age and that inexperience to send a message from the start, then what do you expect? Do you expect them to get the message if there was no message? That's, I mean, so I look at that part of it as well. And not only that, but Wes Phillips being arrested and then going out and getting to not call plays, but be a part of the offensive staff in Vegas. That was another one that had no consequence to it. And then the NFL stepped in and suspended him for a few weeks in the offseason. Okay. Again, not really a whole lot of consequence there. When it comes to the coach, you're responsible for everything. And the players love the culture and they love how they're treated by their head coach. And I respect that. I think O'Connell has done an amazing job at turning the culture around from where it's at. Also, I was thinking about Mike Zimmer, and we all would ask, well, why is Mike Zimmer the way he is? Why is he so grouchy? Why is he so cantankerous? Because that guy had years and years and years of stuff like this, and the scar tissue built up, and he ran out of tolerance for it. That was part of it. And, that's maybe a young coach thing with Kevin O'Connell, of learning that sometimes you have to lay down the hammer. So you have to be the guy in charge. You have to send the message. And maybe he'll do that this time with Jordan Addison. Maybe he won't. I don't know. If he doesn't, I'll really have a lot of questions. But maybe he's wishing that he did now last year, and that message could have been received. Or maybe Jordan Addison is a player that he could catch the ball, but he can't catch a message. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe he can't get the idea if he's so clueless that he would do this right after what happened to Kyrie Jackson. I would imagine he had to be aware that one of his teammates died after a drunk driver hit them. I would assume that. And then to go out and be arrested for it himself is so embarrassing. And I can't imagine how frustrating that is to everybody in the Vikings organization. Wes Phillips was not much over the legal limit. Not really the point, though, right? Not really the point. Any sort of drunk driving is any sort of drunk driving. And the point is that your coach, right before you have a game, ends up getting arrested for DUI, which is a massive black eye to your organization, an embarrassment to your organization that would happen. regardless of whether it's 1% or 100% over the legal limit or whatever, however they do it, 0.1 or 0.5. I don't know. Any sort of arrest is unacceptable. And yet he still ends up going out to Vegas, still ends up being a part of the coaching staff for that game with no punishment from the team, and the league handed down the punishment. Well, I think technically the team suspended him to avoid the league punishment. I'd have to check that now, but in the offseason nonetheless. I mean, that doesn't really sound like everybody has to walk on eggshells in this organization. That's how it feels. And you could say it's unfair, but it's Kevin O'Connell's player that just got a second arrest in a second offseason. And when you're the head coach, you're responsible for everything. Anyway, so this has been an unfortunate end to the weekend again. And we'll try again tomorrow, because I would love to go through one of these with just maybe a good time talking about the roster. But here we are, because Jordan Addison can't take an Uber and can't make good decisions. And in the future, he has to, or his career is going to be a lot shorter than he thinks. He's going to make a lot less money than he thinks, and he's going to be able to afford a lot fewer cars than he thinks, especially if he hurts somebody else while doing it. Once again, second year in a row, Jordan Addison, lucky to have a DUI arrest and not more than that. Lucky to have an arrest for going 140 and not more than that. His teammate was not lucky, because somebody else that acted that recklessly sent his car flying off the road and killed him. Another message to everybody watching and listening: take the Uber, be as careful as you can, care about other people. That's all I could say. So what a time. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging in. I appreciate it. Appreciate all of the comments and so forth, and letting me get to some of the receiver depth conversation. So thanks again. And tomorrow night we'll talk more, and we'll do another one of these live shows with another position to preview. So thank you all. And honestly, be safe.